Hello everybody, today we're going to be looking at the Kings Indian Saemich variation from the white and black sides. And if you're not familiar with my methods of learning the opening, it's fast and exciting. We're going to look at miniature games. Those are games under 30 moves, and we're going to go through them really fast and just discuss general themes. And if you're not familiar with this opening, check this video out, and you'll probably have a good grasp of it and be able to play blitz and bullet games right away and with a good understanding of the opening. So stick around, and I hope you enjoy. So our first game we're going to be looking at is from Moscow, 1931. Mikhail Botvinnik with the white pieces versus Vladimir Alatortsev with the black pieces. Excuse me. So Botvinnik white pieces, Alatortsev black pieces. So here we have a modern approach to the King's Indian, but 1931. And again, when we're going over games rapidly, we're not looking for deep analysis here, but just general themes. Remember, we're just trying to learn. And the reason why we look at rapid games is we want to see what it looks like, right? When the white player in this case just completely has everything he wants in the position. And this is how we can see the plans clearly on display for white. Right, there's little resistance because it wouldn't be a rapid game if the game went 80 moves. Right, we want to see White's plan clearly and taken to completion, and this is why we look at miniature games here. And this way we can see the major themes in the game. So already we can see the White conducting a kingside attack. So we know we could check that off. This is a major idea in this opening. You see knight g3, bishop d7, and castle. Notice we see castle in opposite wings now. Again, another major theme. h6, g5, h takes g5. Botvinnik sacrifices a pawn. Another theme. H takes g5. Knight h5, knight ce2. And we can see the storm clouds gathering around the black king. Rook h4, queen d7 protecting the bishop. The other rook piles up on the h-file. King g8, natural move, but too little too late as as black's queen is drawn to a bad square because now it's trapped after bishop h3, queen f3, rook f1, knight takes g3, and just simply bishop e6 check, which is to be followed by the capture on f3. Alright, so again, the important things to take away from this is that white often will castle on the opposite wings, conduct a kingside attack. It's important, very important to open up the h-file, and it's not always of extreme importance to trade off this bishop. As you can see, it's ineffective here. But what you want to do is look at a bunch of miniature games. So we're going to look at some more. And then we're going to look at the black side, because first you look at miniature games from the white side, and then you want to look at miniature games from the black side to see what happens when black has his way. And then your mind will start to put these two things together, and you'll have a nice grasp of the opening. This next game is from 1932, London, Vera Menchek versus Sir George Allen Thomas. Again, right to it. Again, there you see the king side advance. Opposite wing castling, so we can see a pattern here. And you'll see a new idea here that you want to commit to memory also. a4, and you can see black is trying to create some counterplay on the queen side, but it seems a little slow. Queen b8, bishop h6. So here we see the idea of trading off the dark square bishop for the first time. This is a well-known theme, but just for the newer player, it's important at certain times to remove this dark square bishop. That way you can occupy the dark squares that are left weak with your other pieces. Queen a7, and there it is. Bishop takes g7, king takes g7. And here's the move that I was talking about. It's often thematic in these positions. And now you can see the idea of the rook being on the G file. Uh, Knight F5 check. And notice now that the bishop is gone, the king has been moved to the G file. And now you see this thematic sacrifice with the pawns on E4 and G4. So when the knight is captured, this opens up the G file, and now it makes this rook move earlier look very good. A3, and now white's attack is far enough advanced where she can just simply ignore the queenside attack of black. So F6 is played, driving the king back into the corner. Queen H6, threatening mate. Queen takes B2, not a big deal, as King B1 is played. The knight is protecting A2, Rook G8, protecting against mate. H takes G6, F takes G6, and then simply Queen takes H7, a nice move to end the game. So again, we saw the thematic opposite wing castling, attack on the king side. But this time we saw the bishop removed on G7, traded off, and we saw thematic knight jump to F5 sacrifice, where the pawns on E5, on E4 and G4. Let's look at the next one. Like I said, this is fast and furious. Here's a play named Areza versus a play named Gonzalez. This is from Mexico City, 1932. Again, we see the early advance of the G pawn. And now we see the same idea of conducting the king side attack. The H file is open here. Again, the same idea of getting rid of the dark square bishop. And look how black's king is completely exposed. And after rook d g1, the game is over. So already you can see how white is trying to play here. Another game. Prague, 1933, Jorge Pelican versus a player named Yager. Again, the early advance on the king side, and you can see here that black is trying to slow down the king side attack here with this move H5. However, there's the penalty of weakening your king side somewhat doing that. And we can see here that in this case it was a little bit, sort of ineffective. And just nice aggressive play by white here. And then after rook H5, black resigned. Queen C2 was also good, or Queen F2. But now you see the pattern and themes here. And we'll look at one more game from the white side, and then we'll switch it. Actually, I want to look at the game Vladimir Savon versus Victor Brand, and this is from Mar del Plata, 1971, and this will be the last game from the white side, and then we'll look at it from the black side in the same rapid manner. So C4, Knight F6 started out as English. Now we are in the Saemich variation of the King's Indian. And the reason why I want to show you this game is because you can see some more ideas, some different ideas from white. So here it starts out typical with the opposite wing castling. But here, if you notice, white has not yet committed to any attack on the king side. Alright, so before he does that, he opens up the center, plays knight b3, and he dominates on the d file. Right, so already black has to worry about this d6 square in particular, the d file, and also the b. He has to keep an eye on b6. Savon plays c5, and notice how the c5 pawn controls b6 and d6 square. Black tries to mitigate that by playing bishop to f8, keeping an eye on d6. Knight a4, bishop e7, queen c3. The knight hops back to f8. And now knight b6 attacking the rook. Rook goes to b8, and now knight c4. So this knight has an option at some time to go to d6 or b6. Again, notice no kingside attack, at least not yet. Knight 6 d7, and now you see the kingside attack. So what's the new idea that I'm presenting here? The new idea is that white has the option to play on in different sectors of the board. It doesn't always have to be just a straight on head on kingside attack. As you see in this game, you see a domination of the d file, namely the d6 square, and you also see white exploiting the b6 square also. So play can be in the center and on the queen side. All right. Now this is a complex opening. You don't have to take the caveman approach and just beat down the king side castle all the time. So you see here, Grandmaster Savant is mixing it up. So he's giving black a lot to think about on the d file and on the queen side and center. And then all of a sudden, as the pieces are drawn away from the defense of the king side, right? They're concerned about the c5 square, d6, right? As the pieces are drawn away from the defense of the king, he launches this attack on the king side. So knight d6 is played, attacking the rook on d8, and notice he's playing back and forth. Now he's attacking in the center, and king side. So now bishop c4, right? So this bishop was pretty bad on f1, brings it to its best square, because if this knight moves now, then there's trouble on f7. So knight d takes c5, and there's f7. f7 falls, and now there's a pin here. If the king captures on f7, there's a pin of this knight right here, and that's what this combination is based on. So the king captures, knight takes, bishop takes, and notice the knight on e6 cannot move. King f6, rook takes d8, queen takes d8, and then simply f4. And there's nothing that black can do here in this position, right? If queen c7, because this, of course, is a big idea here. If a move like knight takes f4, then simply rook f1 is very strong. And then if a move, say queen c7, trying to just hold on here, and just simply f takes e5, and then of course if queen takes e5, then just simply rook f1, separating the king and queen. So after f4, black resigned. But that was the last game I wanted to show you from the white perspective, to show you that it's not just about the kingside attack, but white is able to attack in different aspects of the board. But I suggest that when you first start playing the Saemich, you just concentrate on that, concentrate on the kingside attack. But of course, know that there's other plans in the position. So now what we're going to do, right, we're all happy about the white side. Now we're going to really learn this, and we're going to flip it and see what it looks like when black has his way. Okay, so now I've flipped the board over, because now we're going to look at it from black's perspective. We're going to look at some miniature games, some short games. Okay, and this first game is from the Hague Olympiad in 1928. And a player named Wilhelm Schellhout versus a player named Arpad Vadya. Okay, so the game started out d4, knight f6, c4, g6. Right, we're talking about the Kings Indian Saemich here. f3, and we're looking at it from black's perspective. So rapid development, of course, from black, and we have our typical Saemich position here. b6. B6 is played. And there we have it, our opposite wing castling. So we have our opposite wing castling, and white is ready to go ahead and destroy black, right? But let's see what black has to say about it. So C5 is played. D5, all typical stuff. And now, see A6. And already we can see uh, one of the ideas of black in the position, and that is to counterattack on the queen side, okay, rapidly, right? Notice we don't see moves like h5 from black playing on the same side of the board, all right? But in here we don't even see the move f5, right? We see the counterattack on the queen side. So you have an opposite wing attack, and so it's basically a race to see whose attack is going to make it there first. Knight e5 from black. Bishop e2. b5. Very important. That the sacrifices in opposite wings attacks are good, because normally the pawns don't matter as much. It's who gets their attack in first, who gets their pieces in first. C takes b5, a takes b5, bishop takes b5, bishop a6. Again, not to go into a deep analysis, I like queen a5 better, or queen b6 better than just trading off this bishop right here. Because actually, I think this is a good bishop for white. Excuse me, a good bishop for black to keep this light square bishop. But anyway, he traded it off. Rook takes a6, queen e2, queen a8, and you can take a moment and see that black's attack is a little bit faster. Okay, so for the price of a pawn, his he has two open files, the B and A file. So it's kind of like almost like a Benko Gambit type position by transposition. All right, and you can see the difference in the other games we looked at when we were looking at the white side. How usually it was white's attack that got in first. So by sacrificing the pawn here, we can see that black has kind of shifted the tides, and now it is white who has to be extremely aware uh, of his king's vulnerability. Notice too, with the position of the knights on e5 and f6, that it's hard for black to push f4 to kick this knight away because of the pressure on g4. Okay, and then if he pushes g5, he would just merely be locking up the position, right, and won't be able to get his get his attack going. So now he plays king d2 and decides, hey, I'm out of here. I'm going to evacuate, right? So the warning alarms have went off in the king's castle, and now the king is evacuating. This is a good sign for black. So rook b8, king e1, and we'll go again rapidly. c4, very powerful move, occupying the d3 square, of course. Bishop c1, knight f to d7. Finally, that move f4 is played, but to no avail, because black has an excellent square for his knight on d3. And usually a knight on the 6th rank is worth an exchange, so white did the right thing for all practical purposes. Knight comes out to c5, queen f3, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and then rook a4, or rook a2 could have been played too, but rook a4 is just as good. And we got to see the thematic play from black in this opposite sides castling scenario. So that's one game. Here's another game from 1931, Carl Helling versus F.M. Bogolyubov with the black pieces. Again, typical Saemich variation. Kingside attack starts from white. Notice black starts his counterplay immediately with this double attack on the c pawn. b3, c5, a5 is a good move. Again, we're not going into deep analysis though here. Bogle-Ubov plays c5, bishop e3, knight fd7. Notice here too, again, not to go into deep analysis, but notice how willing black is to just give up this pawn here. And in this case, it would just be a big blunder because of the simple fact that the knight is hanging. But early in the development of the King's Indian, this pawn used to be kind of sat out there as like bait for players, and a lot of white players will fall into the trap of going after that pawn too much and then wind up losing a lot of games. If you look at the Zurich 1953 tournament, Bronstein writes about the weakness, or he puts it in quotes, the weakness of the d6 pawn. But again, I'm not going to get deep into it because it is for the most part a fictive weakness, it's not real. But sometimes it can be, of course. But when the King's Indian is played right, that pawn can be very problematic when captured. Okay, so knight fd7 is played. White sticking with the normal themes, trading off the bishop. And now here's a good time to trade the bishop off because, again, this bishop is very powerful in his diagonal. And, of course, white is employing a good strategy to get rid of the bishop. Here, Bogle-Ubov plays a good move and just capturing, right? He saves time. Instead of letting white capture, he captures and basically gains a move here. So queen h6, and now he just takes over the weak and dark squares with his queen. No, what can we learn from that is that when you do lose your bishop, right, it's not losing the bishop itself that is bad. What's bad is losing control over the squares that the bishop used to guard over. Alright, so losing the dark square bishop itself is not a problem, I repeat. It's losing control over the squares. So notice after the dark square bishop is traded off, black immediately takes over those squares with the queen. Because all the queen is a rook combined with a bishop. So it has the powers of a rook and a bishop. So now the queen is occupying the diagonal and taking over all the dark squares, protecting all the dark squares that the bishop was protecting, right? And more because it has the powers of a rook also. And this is why, although the dark square bishops are traded off, black is not doing worse because he has the squares still covered. King c2 is played. And by the way, there was a threat on the knight on c3. King c2. Knight e5, bishop g2, rook f d8, knight g2, knight takes f3, and here, after bishop takes f3, which was kind of a risky move by white, risky move by black here, is knight takes f3. a5 is probably more accurate. Right, just continuing the attack on the queen side. But he took this pawn right here, and one of the ideas inherent in this position is that if he played, rook f1 trying to go for the pin, then he could just trade off queens here. Okay, so this is why he felt safe to play knight takes f3. But after bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, then the simple move rook d f1 would put black in a whole lot of trouble here. Okay, the pieces would start flooding in, and then we would see, the thematic ideas of the king side attack that we discussed earlier from the white side. However, as fate would have it, white played h4, again natural, right, to open up the H file, right? Squandered his advantage away. And this allowed black to consolidate. So after queen f6, h5, queen g7, offering the trade of queens. And offering the trade of queen pretty much pretty much kills off the kingside attack and offers an endgame. So you might be saying, how is this a miniature game if they traded off queens? Well, one of the great one-move blunders of all time that I wanted to show you is Carl Helling uh, solidified his place in history by playing G takes F7 check, throwing in that extra move. We all do that sometimes, right? Before a capture, we we try to show how much chess knowledge we have, and we make that extra capture like, hey, I'll pick the queen up on next move. Well, after G takes F7, Bogle Yubov just simply played King G7, and now he has to just give up a rook. Now he's instead of just capturing the queen back with the rook like he's supposed to do, he tried to throw that extra move in there, and then he was forced to resign. So he had his chance at victory over the great Bogle Yubov, but he came up short with the one move blunder. Here's another game from the black side, 1934 from player Garibin versus Sath with the black pieces. Here we see, I don't like this move too much, but we see as a common theme that sometimes black will try to slow down white's kingside ambitions by playing h5 himself. Again, this move is double-edged because, yes, it does slow down white maybe temporarily, but it creates weakness and brings the black pawns closer to the white pawns. So after, say, moving the knight back to f2, then the g4 is easier to execute. So it's a double-edged move here. So king b1, b5, and you can see right away black gets started with his kingside attack. Again, queenside attack, and again notice the thematic response of the pawn sacrifice. Right? Think Banco Gambit if you're familiar with that. Again, you have two files open. A and B file open for the price of a pawn. And just remember this setup right here. So we can see again, black has successfully slowed down white's kingside attack. And for the price of a pawn, he has the open B and A files, and he is well developed here. Rook C2, queen takes C6, he gets his pawn back. White goes for the thematic bishop trade. Now, here it's again it's not as important because the bishop on G7 is not really doing too much, but white wants to occupy those squares around the king, so he goes for the trade. Queen A4, and here just simply bishop takes G7 would be better choice for white. And the reason is if king takes G7, this move is very powerful. Remember we discussed that earlier, this thematic idea. Because then what happens is after G takes, queen comes in and this knight cannot be held on to. So king F8, here now you're threatening mate. Queen has to come back. And black's position just absolutely falls apart. Instead, he played the move rook C1, which allowed black to gain time by playing rook B4, attacking the bishop. And the problem here is that this bishop is guarding the A2 square. So for example, if he just played back there to just keep from getting captured, then move like knight takes b3, and there's a lot of problems there, right? After say a takes b3, then queen a2, king c2, and then you get mated. So it was like a oversight on white's part here, but it happens. and then the game ended in rapid manner. But again, these are miniature games for a reason. Errors have to be made for the games to be so short. But what your job is to do is extract, right, the major themes and tactics from the opening. So I hope by this time you understand what white is trying to do, generally in the position, and that now you should understand what black is trying to do, especially in these opposite wing situations, as you can just see and glance from this position right here. Here's another one from Gideon Barksa with the white pieces versus a player named Abramovicius with the black pieces. Here we see the common response in the Kings Indian, where you see this F5. And remember, this is early, this is 1936, so this is early in the development of King's Indian theory. So F4, and again, you see this classical setup where both players are castling on the same side, and then you see black's plan to attack on the king side also. And I just like this game because it's early in the career of the King's Indian. And you can just see the pieces just swarming. Threatening mate there. Bishop has to move. So he's threatening mate and the piece. And the pieces are just all over the place. And white is forced to resign there. Okay, so you can see that when there's same side castling, and black has the option of playing f5 and g5, g4, etc., and just absolutely barricading, storming the castled king side. When it's opposite wing castle, you have the same option, but just attacking on the queen side, and sometimes it's beneficial to sacrifice a pawn in order to get your attack going first. One more. This is from a player named Husang versus Barnstead, 1938. Here we see white has not committed to any side of the board. And we can see black opens up the queen side. There's that thematic move to jump to d3 again. So c takes d3, queen takes d3, and black again sacrifices a pawn for open lines. And black just exploits the fact that white refused to get his king into safety and just totally overruns the white position. Okay, so that will do it for our survey on the King's Indian. So hopefully by now you have learned the the general themes from if you're playing the white side, and you know what black is trying to do also. So what I suggest at this point is you play a bunch of speed chess games, whether it's bullet or 3 minute or 5 minute. Don't worry about the trying to get in it or the theory and all that stuff. Just get the general feel for the position. Throw those pawns at the opponent, sacrifice, work on the tactical play, but just with the general themes in mind. Attacking on the queen side, opposite wing, castling, etc. If you're black, work on the themes. Again, if your opponent does opposite side castling, you know what to do now. You sacrifice a pawn, to open up those A and B files, and you get those pieces going. And if your opponent attacks on the king's castles on the same side as you, you play F5, and you try to overwhelm him on the king side of the board. Okay, those are your general themes. And then after you feel comfortable in those positions, then you start studying games that are a little more competitive, right? Where you can start seeing what it's like where there's resistance on both sides and they're countering each other's plans, because now you'll have a solid foundation of what everybody's trying to do, and then you'll see, okay, Botvinnik did this move because white wants to play G4 and G5 and etc. and open up the and H4 H5 open up the king side. So now then your understanding will be open because now you have the a good foundation. Then you start going over more competitive games, and then you do the same thing with the middle game. You study the middle, you look at games a little bit longer, and then you see, okay, this is what's going on now in the deeper parts in the middle game. You do the same thing from the white side, same thing from the black side. Then after that, you start looking at the typical end games that arise. And I'm telling you, if you follow this approach with all your different openings, your openings will be a lot stronger. I don't even play the King's Indian uh, Saemich variation or from black. I don't play it at all. So, but I know the opening. I know enough to where I can play it. I can play blitz games with the Sandwich right now, because of just the way I approach the opening. So I'm trying to share it with you, and hopefully, I hear some good feedback and from the videos. And if there's some opening you want me to look at in this fashion, let me know. All right, I'll talk to you guys on the next video.